Um, I apologize. We're going to continue. This is called Ancient Greece. So we were at dangers of a good speaker. So once during the Peloponnesian War, news arrived in Athens that the island of Mytilene had revolted against Athens' rule. After a heated debate involving some clever speech-making by a few outraged citizens, the Athenian assembly voted to put to death or enslave everyone on the island. The next day, the Athenians were so appalled at what they had done that they called another assembly and reversed the decision. Luckily, the second order arrived at the island just in time to save the lives of the inhabitants. Sometimes, when it was feared that one good speaker was swaying the assembly too much, the people voted to have an ostracism. Everyone was invited to write down on an ostracon, a fragment of pottery, the name of any man they felt was acting wrongly. If more than 6,000 people voted against someone, that man was banished from the city for 10 years. Playing one's part. A few Greeks did not enjoy fulfilling their democratic responsibilities. This was considered highly improper. A gang of slaves, each with a rope dipped in red paint, were looking for anyone who was trying to avoid going to the assembly. People who were caught were daubed with red paint as a mark of shame and were frequently fined. There is a class of people in Athens, gentlemen who excel at voicing the rights of others in this assembly. To them my recommendation would be simply this: they should make it their aim to do justice to Athens when speaking to others. Then they will begin by doing their own duty. They should make it their aim to do justice to Athens when speaking to others. Then they will begin by doing their own duty. By Demosthenes. Demosthenes. Although every citizen had the chance to speak and affect decisions, Athenian democracy was not always fair. A single defeat in wartime or an unexpected disaster, such as a plague or a famine, could lead to panic, and the fickle mob would turn on their leader, even one as great as Pericles. Pericles. Some Athenians complained that ignorant poor people had too much power, but most Athenians cherished their system. Okay. Public life. A large open space, known as the Agora, was the central public meeting place in a Greek city. This space was carefully protected. There were boundary stones around its edge. and no one was allowed to build houses or anything else on it. The Agora of Athens, which was surrounded by many fine public buildings, was an impressive sight. But this was not the case in every city. The Spartan Agora was particularly dull and uninteresting. The historian Thucydides said that if Sparta ever became deserted, no one visiting the city in later days would believe how powerful it had once been. Precedent for a day. Some of the buildings around the Agora in Athens were used for the government of the city. The assembly itself, however, was so large, at least 6,000 citizens had to be present for the meeting to proceed, that it had to gather just outside the city on a hill called the Panete. The splendid Athenian Agora, a large open marketplace where farmers and craft workers sold their produce. Stalls were set up in the open area as well as inside the long colonnaded buildings called stoas. Official standards used to measure corn, wine, oil, and other goods. They stopped any cheating and helped officials settle arguments between traders and their customers. The assembly met about every 10 days to pass laws. The job of drafting the laws was done by the council, or boule, which met in one of the Agora buildings, the Bouleuterion. The boule was made up of 500 men of the council, and chosen by lot 50 from each of the 10 tribes into which the citizens of Athens were divided for political purposes. Because the boule was still very large, each group of 50 served in turn to lead the council. So each group of 50 served in turn to lead the council as an executive committee or prytany. The prytany met every day. Each day a new president was elected, and for that day he was head of the Athenian state and had the power to declare war. This was only allowed to happen to a man once in his lifetime. During their period of office, executive committee members lived in the Tholos, close to the Bouleuterion. 17 committee members slept in the Tholos at night, so that someone was always on duty in case of emergency. Meals were provided at public expense. Fragments of pottery have been found with DE scratched on them, short for demotion, or public, presumably so that prytany members would not walk off with pieces of the official dinner service. Okay, so there were 500 men in the boule, which was a council, and so 10 tribes had, each tribe had 50 members or citizens. Okay, and the Agora in Athens So is made up of the Boleterion, or the council chamber, then seats or council of the Boule, which is 500, and then Tolos, then beds. So Tolos is the place where they lived, the people, the 500 people. And the beds and the tables for eating, the old Boleterion, public records, and state documents. Government buildings. These 3 government buildings stood at the edge of the Athenian Agora. The old Boleterion, built in about 500 BC, was the original meeting house of the council or boule. It fell out of use as a debating chamber about 400 BC, after which it was used to store public records and documents, state documents. The boule then met in the new Boleterion. The Dolos was an eating and sleeping place for the prytany. It had so the prytany is each group of the 50, which is basically an executive committee called the prytany. So it had a kitchen and toilet at the back. The Dolos did. And the Dolos was also the place where standard weights and measures were kept. 5 officials were appointed by lot to make sure that fair measures were used in the marketplace. They were kept busy since many shopkeepers set up their stalls around the agora, jostling each other for the best site. So these are the buildings of the government. And inside the Boleterion, or council chambers, and the seats where they're sitting, the 500 members are called the boule. The 500 members, which is the boule, and are in the Boleterion, or the chamber. And this is where they live, they sleep, called the Tholos, and which contains the beds and tables for eating, etc. Their living chambers. And this is where they keep the old documents, etc., public records and state documents. It's called Old Boleterion. That's that. And that's how they store their documents. In wooden cylinders, cylindrical containers. And there's a statue of the Mother of the Gods in the old Boleterion. So the Tholos, beds, and eating area, etc., and then where they meet, the chamber where they meet, and the documents area. And that's the Agora in Athens. And so that's basically their government system, a science and philosophy. As they sheltered from the sun in the open-sided market buildings around the Agora, Greeks loved to talk and argue. They discussed all aspects of the world around them, the way it worked, the meaning of life, and the nature of human behavior. They called this study philosophy, meaning the love of wisdom. Observation or theory. The love of wisdom led some Greeks to the first discovery of many of the scientific laws and principles of nature. Careful observation and calculation were the keys of these discoveries. The scientist Archimedes noticed that the water level rise and fall as he got in and out of his bath. He realized that each time he got in, his body displaced its own volume of water. He went on to work out that the same would be true for any object placed in water, and gave his famous yell of excitement, "Eureka!" which means "I've got it." Other Greeks wanted to go beyond pure observation to try to understand the underlying meaning of the physical world. What was the world made of? Did things really move or only appear to move? The Greeks were fascinated by many of the same questions that physicists and astronomers ask today. Some of their conclusions were wrong, but some were remarkably accurate. A Greek scientist, Leucippus of Miletus, first suggested that the universe was made up of millions of tiny particles or atoms joining up in different combinations and always moving. Modern scientific experiment has proven him correct. So this is many Greeks preferring their traditional superstitions. They were suspicious of philosophers, but some were keen to discuss the new ideas. Votive works similar to this one were commissioned by grateful patients to thank the gods for successful cures. This mechanical screw devised by Archimedes to raise water from a river onto land was one of the few contributions that the Greeks made to technology. The new medicine. The same scientific approach was used in medicine too. Hippocrates was one of the first doctors who did not regard illness simply as a punishment from the gods. He examined his patients to find out what was wrong with them and tried to prescribe suitable practical treatment. Hippocrates' ideas were surprisingly modern. He always began each treatment by finding out everything he could about the patient, such as age, type of work, and even behavior and sleep patterns. This was all, but before he asked about the symptoms of the illness itself. Hippocrates gave his name to the Hippocratic Oath, by which doctors promised to work in the best interests of their patients. A version of the oath is still taken by doctors today. Mathematics. The Greeks also worked out some basic rules of mathematics. For the first time. Pythagoras of Samos experimented with patterns using pebbles and sand until he finally worked out his famous theorem on the relative lengths of the sides of a right-angled triangle. He also realized that the notes of the scale in music are mathematically related to the length of the string being plucked, or to the length of the pipe being blown. Socrates, one of the greatest Greek thinkers shown here, led people to the truth by asking questions and letting them answer in their own way. Putting science to use. Although they made such an important contribution to the development of scientific knowledge, the Greeks did not show much interest in technology. Putting that knowledge to practical